Honda CRF300L, the bike of your dual sport dreams? Maybe. What's up guys, my name is Andrew and this is my Honda 300L full review. I've been making a ton of videos on the Honda 300L and I've put about 500 miles on this bike. Oddly enough, most of those miles have been off-road. But I have taken this bike on road, on trails, in sand, and in some really deep mud. I feel I have a good understanding of the bike at this point, and I'm here to help you guys out, make a more informed decision whether or not you should buy this bike or consider this bike for your own personal use. First, I just want to take a second and talk about bike reviews out there. When you're looking for a review, usually you find one of two less than ideal situations. In one scenario, you'll find a big bike reviewer who is far removed from the common rider, and their needs are sometimes biased when they come to a bike review, and fear that if they do a negative review, they may never get a chance to ride a sample bike again. This happens in many different industries, and when it comes to dual sports and motorcycles, I believe it's not much different. Now, I'm not saying these bikers have bad credibility or anything like that, but in some scenarios, they are leaned to give maybe a more positive review than they would like. On the other side of the spectrum, you find new riders, maybe someone who this could be their first or maybe third bike, and sure, they love their bike, but they don't have many experiences to compare it to, so their bias will bleed out into the joy of having the bike, and they'll express the interest of justifying their purchase. Today I'm coming to you as a dual sport rider. I've had experience with many bikes over the years. No, I've never raced motocross, and I've never done a hare scramble, but I enjoy putting miles on my dual sports on and off road. By no means is this all of them, but as I'm talking, I'll take the time to mention the bikes that I've had and had the luxury of putting hours on. And I'll throw some pictures up here, and these were the ones that I happen to have on this very hard drive on the computer that I'm making this video. The point I'm trying to make is I'm someone in the middle of both scenarios mentioned before, where I feel I can offer good advice to the average person looking to buy this particular dual sport. So let's break this review down. And firstly, I'm going to say this is probably going to take a while, because something like the 300L is really worth explaining in detail. So hopefully you're comfortable, and let's get ready to go. The road use of this bike is very important. I mean, after all, we are dual sport riders. If we never went on the road, we might as well just get a dirt bike and call it a day. So just like any dual sport, this bike has to be capable on the road, which is a point that some people may argue is a problem for a small displacement bike like this. You've seen it time and time again when a lot of the 250s out there that they are just not capable enough for the road. I, for one, was super excited when I heard the news that Honda was going to offer a fuel-injected 286cc dual sport. The best dual sport experiences that I have ever had have been on my DR350S, which also has a 6-speed transmission and has enough power on the road, along with enough low-end off-road. But the 300L turned into be much more than this. This bike is smooth. I can quote my riding buddy Jacob by saying, "It didn't really even feel like a dual sport. It felt smooth, like a road bike." This bike is smooth to the point that if you wanted to, you could strictly use it as a commuter bike. For sure, the 300L Rally may do that a bit better and has a bigger fuel tank and a slightly longer wheelbase. But the Honda 300L is no slouch on the road. With a top speed of 85 miles per hour, you can achieve highway speeds without an issue, if you had to. The stock IRC tires and the soft suspension feel amazing on the road. If you take anything from this review, just remember this. For someone who just wants to ride back and forth to work and hit some fire cuts or light trails on the weekends, this bike is for you. Stock, this bike will meet all your needs and it will feel great doing it. Hands down, the road experience on this bike is probably one of the best a dual sport can offer, at least until you get to the more advanced touring adventure type bikes, which are much bigger, have more displacement, and cost much more money. As comfort goes, this bike's not that bad. I was actually surprised. Most dual sports feel like you're sitting on a 2x6 piece of wood. This bike's not that bad, but just like all dual sports, you will know that you are riding one after an extended ride. And you may want to get a more comfortable seat if you are doing extended rides on this bike. But I can say personally that I would have to say this bike's stock is more comfortable than my SV650 was. After a long extended ride on an SV650, I was so numb that I would just want to get off the bike and walk around. And honestly, the seat doesn't matter quite as much on a dual sport because the pegs are orientated in such a way that if you wanted to, you could do a bit of your riding standing up and give your butt a break. The seat height of this bike is 34.7 inches and the Rally is 35.2, both reasonably good. Not too tall where you feel top heavy, but tall enough allowing for good ground clearance and suspension travel, as well as allowing a 21-inch front tire and 18-inch rear, which when we start to talk about the off-road stuff, that really comes into play. So in my opinion, I would have to say, for its class, the Honda 300L gets a 10 out of 10 on the road. By far one of the best dual sport on-road experiences that I have personally rode. Okay, so since we took time to talk about on-road conditions, let's take some time to talk about a little more technical off-road type stuff like light trails, fire cuts, and loose dirt. I would have to say most of all, this is where this bike shines. It's so much fun. Once you take this bike through some light trails, you'll really appreciate the dual sport nature of this type of riding. See, the 300L feels almost like a dirt bike. Sure, we all know it's not, and in fact it knows it's not, and it will remind you of that anytime you try to go crazy. But the beauty of a bike like this is being able to just ride around and think to yourself, I wonder where that trail goes. Well, I don't see any signs saying I can't go there. I could always play dumb and say I took a wrong turn. Yeah, let's do it. That inner feeling is so freeing. This is why we love dual sports so much. And once you get off-road, the Honda 300L kind of feels like a dirt bike because the gears complement that feeling. The gears are spaced very close together at low speeds, and the tires are the right size to complement that feeling. Once again, the tires are pretty good at this, but once you find yourself doing a little more off-road and doing this more often than not, it comes time that you're going to need more aggressive tires. Me personally, I ran the stock tires for all of one night. By day 2, I put my Pirelli on the front and my Michelin AC10 on the rear of the bike. But for me, this was an extreme situation for I was going to be taking it on sand and single track the next day. It was another camping trip where I was going to spend the whole weekend dual sport riding. So by no means did I need to do that if I was consistently staying on light trails, which most people do. And once again, the soft suspension kind of complements this type of riding. If you're not going over anything too crazy and you're not getting any air, the soft suspension is actually relieving. It feels good. Only when you get caught off guard by a big rut do you actually notice how soft it really is. So once again, if you are taking this bike just for rides down soft trails, dirt roads, fire cuts, this bike feels great and it excels. Alright, now let's move on to off-road. For me, I would have to say you have to take it with a grain of salt. If you're talking about the bike completely stock, it can be relatively bad off-road. I mean on the thick stuff. You absolutely need new tires. A set of Kendra Trackmasters would do great on this bike. They're pretty cheap and pretty easy to swap out. Though, just like anything, if you move towards one direction, you lose usefulness in the other. If you still want to do a ton of road, I would suggest going with maybe a Dunlop D606. You could probably get 1,500 to 2,000 miles depending on how much on off-road you do with that type of tire. Me personally, I wanted to try out the Michelin AC10, and it looks like I'm going to get about 1,000 miles before I personally want to swap them out. They'll still have life in them, but just not enough where I would feel that it's a competent off-road tire. But But as I mentioned before, the tire size is ideal and the gearing is great. So as far as for off-road, the power is great. For people who have rode the 250L, this is nothing like it. So the bike is still using something like the CDR engine, but they extended the stroke, giving the bike a claimed 18 to 20% more low-end power. That coupled with a new transmission and more aggressive stock sprockets makes the bike very formidable off-road stock, given that you get it some good tires. Honestly, the bike feels really well and it's very maneuverable. Have no problem switching in and out between tree to tree on single track. Some people may be complaining about the weight, 308 pounds, but honestly it's a pretty easy fix. If you swap out the exhaust, change the battery to lithium, swap out the bars, aluminum sprocket, take off your foot pegs, you'll probably get under 280 pounds. I've done everything above except for the exhaust, and I've also done a tail tidy kit. That's a pound or so. I didn't weigh that one yet, but I can tell you that my bike should be about under 300 pounds, but at the same time, I added on a skin plate and handguards. But you will get criticism from the KTM and Husqvarna guys that claim that their bike is only 238 pounds, dry weight. And so actuality, this bike is really not that much heavier. 238 pounds can easily be 268, 278 pounds depending on cooling fluids, fuel, brake fluid, etc. All that stuff has weight, guys, and roughly about 8 pounds a gallon. But regardless, the bike doesn't feel heavy. I would have to say personally, the only limitation of this bike is me. If you were an amazing rider and just rode off-road all the time, you could really do some amazing things with this bike. It seems like anytime I point it at a hill, it climbs right up it with no problem at all, and that was even before I redid the gearing. The one thing to note though, is this is where your suspension is going to start to be a problem. I do a lot of stand-up ridings, so for me, it's not too big of a deal. I just bounce through it. It's not as squishy as something like the 250L, but I would say for a heavier rider, you should get stiffer springs. It's not an unreasonable request, being this bike is only $5,300 MSRP, and if you end up spending $1,000 or $1,500 in suspension, it puts you at the price range of a WR250, which seems pretty reasonable for this bike. So all in all, off-road, this is a pretty comparable bike, and it seems to do everything I want it to do. Now let's real quickly talk about looks and aesthetics. If you guys have been following the channel, I'm sure you've seen tons of b-roll of me putting pictures about this bike, and even in my video of my top favorite things, the top things I love about this bike, the looks and aesthetics were number one. This bike looks clean and it looks aggressive. Almost everywhere you go, you will get a compliment or you will get stares and people just admiring the beauty of this bike. It has sharp lines, high fenders, beautiful color. It's put together really nice. Something you will always get compliments on. And you can go a little step further like I did. I did the tail tidy kit, put some rim decals on, and it really makes it pop. But that's enough about that. I just wanted to briefly talk about aesthetics because you guys can find pictures of this bike anywhere. But since this is my review, of course I wanted to put in my own personal opinion. Service intervals and reliability. So I was watching a video the other night, and these guys were in the US and they were taking a travel from the East Coast to the West Coast. It's a common trail that tons of people attempt it on motorcycles. The thing about this video though, is every other day they seem to be changing their oil, because their bike only had a 600 to 800 mile oil interval. The Honda 300L suggests that you change your oil every 8,000 miles, and then every other oil change, you change the filter and your oil. That is insane. First off, I don't think anyone would do this, and also it's worth noting that every year you should change your oil anyway, instead of waiting for 8,000 miles. But just the fact this is the ideal service intervals that Honda recommends just shows you that this bike is built to last. Now me personally, I'll be changing my oil every 1,000 miles at the longest, maybe 1,500 if I was on a long road trip and most of my miles were highway. But there's something to be said about a bike that you really don't have to maintain every single weekend. I mean, imagine going on an 8-hour ride through your favorite off-roading spot and then you got to change your oil for next week. It would get quite tedious, especially if you have to move stuff like a skid plate. And when it comes to reliability, this bike makes me think of the 250L. The 250L was bulletproof. In fact, in probably like 10 years, you're probably going to still see 250Ls around with 30,000 or plus miles on. That bike's probably going to last forever. And since this is a modified version of that engine, one would assume that this bike would last forever as well. I know it's crazy to a lot of people out there, but I find myself pulling to the interest of bikes that have very good reliability, sometimes times more importantly, and almost probably most of the times more importantly than performance. As you see from the 3 bikes that I have, reliability is key for me. And man, a great service interval is a huge plus. So when you purchase a Honda 300L, I would say you have the peace of mind that this bike is gonna last. Honda reliability is some of the best. What was the old saying? Honda never gets there first, but it always makes it. So this is the part where we talk about negatives, drawbacks of this bike. I made a video of the top things I hate about this bike, and honestly that was just me expressing the things that weren't perfect. There's not really much wrong with this bike, especially for the price range. If this bike was $10,000, then I would sit here and pick apart every piece of it that is not perfect. I mean, yes, some of it's cheap, but the bike is so affordable that it's almost hard to argue. When you offer a product at such a fair price, compared to what everything else is on the market, then people are willing to overlook small details and little things they can just change themselves. With this bike being so inexpensive, you could put a couple $1,000s of your own money into it and make it exactly what you want. So there's not too much to complain about it, although there is one thing. Okay, I'm gonna go off script and I'm just gonna talk freely about this. And I hope you guys don't think I'm crazy, but here it goes. There's one thing that really bothers me about this bike, and right now that's the availability. You know, it's crazy I have this motorcycle and I'm constantly telling people how much I like it and you should test drive it. My friends, take it for a ride, see if you like it. But the problem is, to what end? I'm making this video for you guys that hopefully in the future there's more availability, but if I try to talk you into this bike so we can be some sort of like connection of us having the same experiences, it's not like you can feel that right now because this bike isn't available. It's like you have to reserve it and then you have to wait, be a lucky one that gets it first. I reserved mine early this year and it got delayed so many times I almost got frustrated enough to rage quit, to give up. I'm glad I didn't. So my biggest complaint is that this bike, there's just not enough of them. In fact, I wish I had a bunch of them, to be honest. You know, I should do that. I should start a petition online, write to Honda saying, Honda, you need to make more Honda 300Ls and you need to give me a bunch of them, right? Because I would have a video up and it would just be like me standing in my pole barn and I would open the doors, you would see me and you would see a ton of Honda 300Ls and I wouldn't keep any of them. I would just give them to you guys. I'd be like, hey, all the guys that have been subscribed, you guys been commenting saying, man, I'm waiting for my bike. I can't wait to get one. It's so hard for me to get one, or I can't afford it. I'll be like, they're right here. Come get them. All you have to do is get it home. You can have them. The video would be like, I hit the lottery, Honda 300Ls, and I'd just be giving them out to everybody. We'd all have to do like one video riding trip of the Honda 300Ls all together. It'd be amazing. So yeah, so that's what's going to happen, guys. If I get a bunch of 300Ls from Honda, or even one more, if somebody just gives me a Honda 300L, I'm giving it to you guys. You guys will be like going back to your friends with this beautiful bike, and your buddy will be like, dude, where the heck did you get that bike? He'll be like, I don't know, just some dude online. His name's Andrew. He has this like Honda 300L channel. He does motorcycles off-road, and he just gave me the bike. He said, come get it. So I came there and I got it. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. Awesome scenario, but that's my biggest complaint. My biggest complaint is that I can't talk anybody into getting this bike. It's not a matter of can they just go get it. It's a matter of all the hoops they got to jump through. Then they got to wait. If they already spend their money on some other bike, like I have a loyal subscriber and he said, hey, I have to wait to this long to get the Honda 300L. It's Luke Fish, I believe, in the comments. And then he's like, but I could get a DRZ right now. What should I do? And a lot of these people, their scenario is, you know, they're not going to buy 2 bikes. They're going to have to buy a bike and deal with it. And honestly, if I had a DRZ 400, I wouldn't even be interested in a Honda 300L because I already have a bike that fits that needs. Yeah, they're 2 completely different bikes. And if I had to choose both of them side by side, I would take the 300L. But if I already had a DRZ, what would be the point? So it's kind of a hard sell, and it's kind of weird having a channel for a bike that no one has or no one can relate to. And the people that are watching it, a lot of times, some of them have them, but some of them are just, you know, looking for information about a bike. It kind of hinders your popularity as well because motorcycling in general, or dual sporting even, is a small niche of a niche. And now I'm mostly talking about a bike that people don't have or can't get. So it's weird. So that's my biggest complaint. Conclusions and final thoughts. Who is this bike for? So thinking about the Honda 300L and everything that we've mentioned previously in this video, that the Honda 300L is a great bike. It really is. And I feel like in time, this is going to be one of those bikes that's never going to be perfect. It might not even be some people's first choice, but I think this bike's going to have a cult following for years to come. When you tack on reliability, this level of performance, ease of use for beginners, and how fun this bike can be for advanced riders, you really have something here. Honda really has fire here, and this bike has so many applications and so many uses, whether it be turning it into a supermoto, adventuring, whatever we mentioned. I'm sure there's going to be a place for it. Being an owner and taking it on every type of terrain imaginable, I would have to say it excels at nothing, but is pretty damn good at almost everything. And honestly, as a dual sport rider, that's what most of us are looking for. Sure, 27 horsepower is never going to give you an adrenaline rush when you rip the throttle, and the shocks are a little soft, and the seat might be a little hard. But when it comes to affordability, reliability, fuel injection, 6-speed transmission, reasonably decent seat height, years of interchangeable parts, this bike's probably going to be around for a long time. And honestly, I feel like it's so much better than the 250L. And you see tons of people who had 250Ls and they love those bikes. If you loved your 250L, you'll really love this bike. It's only better in almost every way than the 250L. In fact, if you have both, you'll probably see yourself not riding the 250L too often, even though you have nostalgia and tons of love and tons of time with that bike. See, for me, I was never a fan of a 250L. I was the fan of the CRF300L, and this bike is basically that bike. More refined, fuel injection, but it's very similar to that bike. So honestly, I fit right at home with this bike. And now this video is coming to a close, and you have my review, and you have my opinions. If you stayed for this long, you guys are awesome. I mean, that basically means you sat here and listened to me talk about my experiences with this bike for like 20 minutes. But I hope at the end of the day, at least you got more information about this bike, maybe saw some cool visuals you like about this bike, and it could help you make a more informed decision on whether or not if you get the opportunity to buy this bike. Overall, as dual sport riders, we're a small group of people, and we're all kind of in this together. In my time with this YouTube community, because I've done YouTube in the past, this community is amazing. You barely find anybody who has anything negative to say. Whereas my other channel, it was just like, you know, people are crazy. So it's awesome to see something like this that brings everyone together. If you found any value in this video, or if you've watched more than one of my videos, do me a huge favor and subscribe, hit the like button below, and leave a comment. Comments help so much. And if you don't know what to comment what number like you are. That would be great. This is a relatively new channel for me, and YouTube doesn't like to really feature new channels. You're seen as a risk because you're not really making that monetization money. So I'm the underdog here, just trying to make some waves. So thanks again, guys. I appreciate all of you. My name is Andrew, and this is my Honda 300L review. Thanks, guys.